the subcontractors, as I mentioned before, like, you have a problem with the client, probably
Yeah.
within 12 weeks, you won't see that client again. But
Yes.
if you have a problem with a subcontractor, you know, you potentially will be seeing them, or maybe they're working on a few different projects at
Yeah.
the same time. Um, I mean, what was your approach to dealing with any problems, whether that was directly with the subcontractor or kind of being the in between for the subcontractor and the client?
So for us, I was usually pretty much always in between them. So they hardly ever communicated with each other. So honestly, there was never really that many like such a huge problems. Um, and if they were at that point, we definitely said to subcontractors, do not speak or agree anything or discuss the progress with the client. Everything has to go through the office, every single interaction. Because again, because all of the subcontractors that worked for us, they were foreigners, as I am, and the interpretations even of what they say and how they said it was taken a lot of times in the wrong way.
For this episode, we're speaking to Kasia, who worked in construction, mainly loft conversions on the project management side. So a lot of dealing with clients, dealing with homeowners, dealing with subcontractors, making sure that projects moved along smoothly or as smoothly as
Mm-hmm.
possible. We all know that's not always the case. So that's going to be the
Correct.
focus of today's talk. Um, Kasia, you can maybe say a bit about what you focused on, what you like to focus on, and how you found dealing with clients in general.
Now, honestly, I think that my main focus was to not necessarily to keep everybody happy, but to make sure that the project is done as soon as possible and to the high standard. So it was kind of like a competition with myself, making sure that we always fit within, we always said 12 weeks, but most of the times it would be 10 weeks or maybe even some of them 6 weeks. And just to make sure we run smoothly.
And your model changed in various ways, actually. I know
Yeah.
as an outsider. How did that change kind of uh, your role, what you had to do, and what you had to focus on? Um, in terms of
So
keeping
my
people
role hasn't
happy.
actually changed much at all. So although the business have transitioned, but I was mainly for the first few years within the business when we kept only one type of dealing with clients and the contract subcontractors. Obviously, we were introducing different methods and adjusting as we went, but the business didn't transition until after I've left. So until I got obviously pregnant with a little baby and was done.
So, um, we find, from talking to our clients, one of the things is they are good at what they do,
Yeah,
but they're not really good at selling it. And they're not really, some of them aren't the best when it comes to dealing with clients who are maybe demanding.
yeah,
The clients don't quite understand what they do, so they feel like
yeah.
they're being cheated, maybe. What
Yes.
advice can you give around that? And for someone that's not good at it, someone that doesn't is not used to it.
I guess it depends if we're talking about the company owner who sells the projects, or are we talking about subcontractors? Because that would be two different things, right? But me as the company owner, for me it was the most important to be as transparent as possible. So starting from the beginning, where I would show them what the process is going to be. Then we would have meetings, regular meetings and catch ups what has happened already, what are we planning for the following couple of weeks, what do we expect from them, and what they basically about the entire progress. Also about some of the issues. Obviously, majority of the issues you don't even talk to clients about because there's no need. You just deal with them. But if there are any significant issues that the client has to be informed because probably going to cost them extra money, you always discuss it before you actually do them. That was like one of the key things. Always discuss it with them, make sure they understand it, and if it is something that they can choose either to do it or not, to give them a choice, and then, do it or not do it. Obviously, there's certain things which, unfortunately, they can't decide either it can proceed or not, such as, I don't know, suddenly a chimney is hanging without any support. They can't choose to leave it as is, but then there's more of a conversation and explaining to them what are the, what are the problems and why it has to be solved, and unfortunately, what is the cost involved. Personally, I found that the clients who are quite demanding, I quite like them because they were always straightforward. And I really liked that they asked lots of questions. In fact, I would always ask them and push them to ask me as many questions as they can, as many questions they have, reassuring them that there is no stupid questions or small questions, because for majority of them, that would be the first big project that they may have been taken on, and they obviously invest a lot of money, often life savings. So be super transparent, clear, keep them up to date, and talk about the issues, but also about the good parts of it as well. And that's translates to the trades guys as well. So any subcontractors, just be transparent with them, obviously on the parts that you have to be, but no sort of sneaking around and trying to do as much as possible for as cheap as possible and so on. So yeah, that would be my approach. That was my approach.
So, I mean, this is something that comes up a lot when I talk to people is often the problem on Friday was actually created by something that happened a week ago or something like that.
Yes.
So, how important is it for, your subcontractors to be actually documenting things properly and
Yeah.
there to be those conversations on a regular basis?
Again, it depends how much resources you have. But for me, it was important to be in touch with every single one of them on a daily basis. So I would always touch base and understand where they are at, what's been done. And obviously within time, you do know how long something's supposed to take. So they can't tell you that, oh, it's going to take a week when you know it's supposed to take 2 days. So you just constantly keep in touch with them, but also challenge them. For me, it was really important to challenge their way of doing things, because often they would say, oh, it can't be done, or this is not the way we do it. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that it can't be done, and it doesn't mean that it's going to be costing more or it's going to take longer. So but understanding their culture and where they're from, I think that also makes a big difference, But again, for me, it was transparency, just understanding. And I think they knew that if they keep messing around, they're just unfortunately not going to get any more jobs from us. So it's a both way road.
Yeah.
You are, you're honest and we're honest as well. So that's how it worked for us.
So, one thing that I'm interested in, and some people they say, oh, I went and did a home visit. I just had a bad feeling about
Mm-hmm.
about that client. Are there
Yes.
any things that you could, in your experience, any red flags, any things you're like, oh, what makes
Do
you
you mean
think?
the red flags when meeting the client?
Well, let's deal with clients first. Yeah, because I
Okay.
do want to know about subcontracts as
Yeah.
well, because I think that's equally
Yeah.
important, if not more, because you're going to work with a client once, but then the subcontractor,
Absolutely.
yeah. So clients,
Yeah.
let's talk
Yeah.
about clients.
So I'm going to start with the kind of most obvious, I guess, points. One, which is respect. So I always and again, my part is something to note. My part I was already dealing with clients that we kind of took on. Okay, sometimes I would meet the clients when they maybe wanted to see previous works before they signed the contract. And that was the time for me to sort of assess and do my assessment. So respectful. How respectful are they? The little things. Are they on time? Are they keeping in touch with me and say, look, I'm running late? But also, how do they talk about other contractors or subcontractors that they have maybe been dealing with before? How much do they talk about problems and how big of an issue is all of this project that they have to do? And money, if everything they want to do as cheaply as possible and then asking all these sort of questions, that's just another red flag for me. And one thing also what was quite important for me was to understand how united the couple is, if there was a couple involved, which in most of the times they were, because if they didn't work together and they had very different ideas of what they want from the project, oh man, that was hard. That was a hard, process to from the start to the end. But even if all of this was great and perfect and they ticked all the boxes and it's like, yeah, green, 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 at the end of the day, it was the gut feeling. It could be everything perfect, but it was just something didn't feel right. It really just listen to it. It means it's not right. And again, I know that it depends on what stage of the business you are. And maybe you're at the very beginning or the first year or two where you do need the projects on board. Just take it. That's fine. You're definitely going to learn something, and you always learn so much more from the difficult projects than the easy ones. But yes, end of the day, a gut feeling.
Yeah, I've started kind of listening to my gut more in recent years, and it's really helping me. Would you say
Amazing.
like in that situation, just charge them more? Like some people would go, you know
Okay.
what? I'm just gonna add 20%
Yes.
to my quote,
Yes.
and if they go for it, they're stupid and they great. But if
Yes.
you
So
know, what do you do?
it
How
was.
do you deal with that?
I think it was two ways. So I was fortunate because I worked with my husband, and he was the second part of the business. He was the second business owner, and so we could have a long discussions and whenever we could. And sometimes it would be the case of they really want it. They really want us to do the project, so let's add. And it's not necessarily to add because for the sake of adding extra percentage, but because of the extra time that we're very likely to spend on a project, which most of the times, to be honest, the money is never worth the time and stress that you're putting into it and energy. But anyway, that would be one case. And there have been some situations where we simply said no. It actually doesn't feel right, and we had to thank the client and say, we don't feel that we are the right fit for you.
Okay. So you
Yeah,
don't
so
just
they would
say,
be
"Oh
just
no, sorry, we're full." You actually would just say to them,
no,
"Look, we
because
don't think."
again, look, we had clients who said, "Oh, we can wait a year." And I'm like, oh man, okay. So the
Yeah.
date, that doesn't change anything. No, it really is the transparency, and I found as transparent you are with yourself and your clients and everybody around you, no matter how upsetting it may be, but they take it much better, and you find it that everything is so much easier as soon as you put some lies into it. I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes we all do, right? Like, but
Yeah, yeah.
when you start making big lies, it's just so hard to keep up, and you don't even remember what you've said, and it's like, man, like it's
Yeah.
not worth it.
Yeah.
So I think just being honest, like we're not the right fit, and that's fine.
I think not the right fit could mean so many things, and it's just like, okay, great, you're
Absolutely.
not. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
offensive either to say that you're not the right
because
fit.
because it doesn't mean they're bad people. It's just we feel it's not right. Maybe we are not the right time to deal with such clients. We maybe don't have the capacity, internal even capacity, to deal with those issues,
Yeah.
which other companies and other people who project manage them might have, and that's fine. So they can do it.
Were there any clients who you initially thought, oh, this is going to be a nightmare, but actually it was fine. It was like, oh,
Um,
look, maybe they just had a bad day that day that I met them, or
Good question. I think it happened the other way around. Definitely, that's what I can
oh,
recall.
right, you thought like,
What I
oh,
felt
these are
was actually,
lovely, and
yeah, and it turned out quite sour because uh, loads of components to it. But I guess one of the things is you you might be providing the same service and the same attention to all of your clients, but there will always going to be someone who's unhappy with what you do and how you do it. They will always find something, that just doesn't make them happy. So I think it kind of happened that way. I'm pretty sure it must have been the other way around, but I don't recall them.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
maybe
I
at the
don't recall
beginning
them.
when you were kind of like just taking on lots of jobs, and you were like, oh,
Yeah,
maybe this couple's not great, but let's just go for it because we need to build up our
because we need it.
portfolio and
Yeah.
things like that, and then it's like, oh, actually, that you probably don't even think about it because you you
To be
moved
honest,
on to the
I feel
next.
how what it was more of that the client felt quite cold and, very, oh, so everything's going to be very like A, B, C, D. And then they actually turn out to be really like lovely people. Like you really
Yeah.
have a good time to deal with them and you wish for more of those clients. So I think, yeah, they've definitely had clients like this, where I felt like,
I
oh, it's going to
mean,
be,
from my point of view, now that you've said that, I do definitely think there are situations where some people think if I'm too friendly from the beginning, they're going to take the mick. So I'm
yeah,
just gonna, maybe they've spoken to three different people. They're thinking, right, let's just
yes,
look at what they say and let's meet them and then figure out who we
yeah.
want to go with. And then once we go with them, then we're like ourselves and, you know, so maybe that's an element of it. What about the contractors, the subcontractors? What are the red flags? What are the things that make you think,
It's
no,
it's
we
a kind
cannot
of a
work with them?
similar list, but probably well, similar list actually. The first is the respect as well. So how do they treat you, right? Like how, and again, starting from the first meeting, you know, how communicative they are. Because for me, it was very important that they're going to be replying to my messages, to my calls, and we can have a good conversation where it has to be done. When I was going to see their sites, how clean the site is, how tidy, how respectful they are of the homeowners' properties. So protection of the staircase and other areas of the house which they may be not working on. And a little bit of the weird things, but something like skips and or the rubbish and seeing like what sort of things do they throw away. Do they throw away
Oh,
loads of uh, things that they could be used still, or they're just kind of careless? Because we knew that this is something what we paying. It's not the subcontractor. And again, depends what deals you have with a subcontractor. But that would be
yeah.
one bit which I looked at. Um, the health and safety, kind of, yeah, the simple, the side ones, and they didn't have to be overly friendly. I didn't much care about that. But if they're kind of on point and you, I think again, it's just a gut feeling. You could feel if someone is honest and hardworking, and they're
Do,
gonna be good.
how
Much.
important? Because, I was thinking, I never thought about that skip thing. That's really interesting. But that almost tells me how good of a business person they are. If they are, like, if they are paying for that stuff, or even if they're not, it's like, that's not a very good business decision. You're just not organized. You're like, oh, just throw it away, you know. So how
Yeah,
important was like how organized they were as a business, how, are they going to be late in issuing invoices? Are they going to be late
yeah,
in getting back? I get the communication bit, but was
yes.
there any way that you could see, okay, are they a cowboy? Are they are they just, or are they doing this
Yeah, but then
seriously?
again, I think this is when you look at their sites and you see, and it depends. Is a subcontractor who has other subbies under, or is it just individual person? Okay, because if he most of the times, but we had the women as well women working for us, but most of the times it's men. If the site is clean and tidy, I mean, it speaks for itself. But if he
Yeah.
has or she has people working for him or her, you observe them and even how they communicate between each other. You also get a feeling how the sites are running and what is the dynamics between them. And if the dynamics are a bit crappy, then this is how it's going to be with us, and I don't want this. But we
Yeah.
were fortunate. We had very, very little, or very little number of people who we had to thank and say, just leave my site or not to take them on board. It was so rare. We were so fortunate with having fantastic guys.
Do you think some of that might have been because you guys are organized? Like I feel like when someone goes to work for someone, they're like, oh, there there's really
Yeah,
no process here. I'm just gonna chill.
yeah,
Or
sure, sure.
but then when you go in, you're like, okay, on Mondays you do this, on Tuesdays I'm gonna call you, and they're like,
Yes,
oh, okay,
but that's
um,
that's the later stage, right? That's not the kind
yeah,
of screening part
yeah,
because they
yeah,
don't know our processes. They don't know unless they have heard of us from other tradesmen. Which after a while, that's what happened. They were what's that word? Oh, I lost it now.
like asking, requesting to,
Yeah, like they were recommended to
oh,
us. We got loads of subcontractors through recommendations, which to us it was, well, if you're recommended by this person, you're most likely to be similar to
yeah,
him, and it's going to be easier process. And they probably already have heard how we work, which what you said. They knew they're going to be getting a planner. They know which date, on which side they have to be, what is going to happen, what time the delivery is going to be. Like they knew everything. And if they didn't know, I don't know. They probably didn't check their phones or whatever. But they
yeah,
always knew. So I don't think it was the case of because we are organized during the screening period, at least at the
yeah,
beginning.
yeah.
Um, I don't. Yeah, it's kind of hard question, but
But I mean, you must have had some guys who you took on who were kind of like just starting themselves, and you kind of maybe they were just like a one man band, or that they were very small and very young business themselves, and then eventually you
yeah.
probably helped them get
I,
organized.
I feel most of the subcontractors, either it was a single man or it was a two or five of them. I don't think that any of them, except maybe one or two, have seen themselves as business people. That is a really important point to make. They don't see themselves as business people, which is great in a sense, because that means if you are the business person, you're running the construction company, they will be fairly loyal to you if you are giving them enough work and you're fair with the prices and so on. So I don't think they do see themselves as that. And we didn't really have that many, other than structural part or the roofing, where it would be few guys at the same time. So one guy might have had few guys working for him. The rest of them would be usually one man band. We prefer
I
that. I
see.
mean, I prefer that. So I knew almost like they're just really good at what they're doing. So we had a plumber, they're just really good at what they're doing. Electricians, they knew what they're doing. Plasterers, oh my God, some of them we had, it was like amazing, but they didn't do anything else. And they never really looked into expanding, as in having more people under themselves. Um, and most of the times, not most of the times, we never really had anybody who was just starting.
Okay,
If if there was somebody like that, it would work under the subcontractor that we have hired.
I see.
Yeah.
Um, the subcontractors, as I mentioned before, like, you have a problem with the client, probably
Yeah.
within 12 weeks, you won't see that client again. But
Yes.
if you have a problem with a subcontractor, you know, you potentially will be seeing them, or maybe they're working on a few different projects at
Yeah.
the same time. Um, I mean, what was your approach to dealing with any problems, whether that was directly with the subcontractor or kind of being the in between for the subcontractor and the client?
Yeah, so
When
for
things
us,
got bad, like when things
so for us, I was usually pretty much always in between them. So they hardly ever communicated with each other. So honestly, there was never really that many like such a huge problems. Um, and if they were at that point, I'm sorry, we definitely said to subcontractors, do not speak or agree anything or discuss the progress with the client. Everything has to go through the office, every single interaction, because again, because all of the subcontractors that worked for us, they were foreigners, as I am, and the interpretations even of what they say and how they said it was taken a lot of times in the wrong way. So, and this is to touch on something. I think this is was why I found it fairly easy to communicate with the tradespeople, because I kind of understood the way they speak and they communicate, which is very different to having English, tradesmen. So so kind of cutting the subcontractor out and not speaking to the client at all, and then trying to deal with the client as in even more updates, even more sort of allowing them to ask questions and keeping them in that loop of what's happening. But look, it did happen a few times where, because I was the person, I was constantly dealing with them, at some point they did not see me as even the not maybe even the right person who can solve the problem or can make the final decision, even though I was a company owner as well as my husband was. But because he was kind of outside and he was the first one to doing all the contracts and so on, they almost needed to hear certain things from him. So it happened a few times where, again, I just need to remove myself and it's fine. Like, I actually was
yeah.
glad I removed myself out of this drama, and then he would deal with it as in just have the final words. I think what's really important is to take the feelings out of the entire interaction, which for me sometimes was not an easy task. And again, my husband's great at this. He can distinction where is the very logical aspect and black and white. Look, this is what we discussed. This is what we've promised. This is what you've requested. And or maybe this is the issue, and that there are those solutions. There's nothing else we can do for you. So we either proceed, or maybe we just have to wrap up and finish the job as it, leave it as that. I don't think it ever happened that we had to
Yeah.
leave the site, but yeah, sometimes you just remove yourself and allow maybe the more senior, or at least the senior that the client sees that the second person as
Yeah.
more senior, to deal with it. And I think this is, if it escalates to it, which hopefully never will, because if loads of processes are in place and the
Yeah.
transparency is there, you really can avoid loads of disagreements with the clients.
And what any in terms of issues, do
Yeah.
you did you find that it was around payment, or did you find that it was mostly around like variations that they felt like
Hmm.
they didn't need, or things like that? What did you think was the most common thing for people to look? People maybe starting their business or want to start
Yeah.
getting into this kind of business. Like, what should they think about in advance?
I didn't deal as much with the payments um, because that wasn't my part in a business. I would deal with all the extras. Okay, so any variations, which you may want to call. And as I said before, it was always the matter of being transparent and saying, these are the options, this is the solutions to something. So, okay, maybe one step back. Their biggest disappointments usually would be on the size of a space that they would get. So they've imagined they're gonna have enormous, bedroom where they can run around and do laps, and then it turns out that they can't. Or there was some mistake in drawings, and then suddenly it's a less. They never complain when it's more. Who does? But when it was less, it was loads of complaints and loads of disappointment, then which you then have to deal with. My skill is that I'm very visual, and I'm really space aware, so I could often adjust what they thought what the design was, and kind of show them, look, even with the space that you've got, if you do this, and that, it's gonna be great. And they often bought it just because it was great, because there's always a solution. But they definitely, that was the biggest, I think, the disappointment of how much space they're getting, or where suddenly the door not supposed to be in this place, but it's 20 centimeters off, but they've already planned for something else to be on that wall, but suddenly they can't. So just meeting their expectations based on what the space actually is. But for me, it was to really trying to get into their shoes and understand. And I was like, yeah, I would be pissed as well, because I thought I'm going to get it, and I didn't. So you feel that you were sold something what you just actually are getting, and you're still paying loads of money for it. But those things happen. You can't. And sometimes it was exactly what's on the drawings, but they still believed or thought that it's going to be bigger, but it wasn't. So I think that was one of the biggest things. It was never really the time, because again, we were very much quite speedy with the works that we were doing. I actually did get complaints that it was too fast.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
I had complaints. They were like, this is just moving too fast, and we didn't expect it, and we have to make these decisions. And I was like, yes, but before this project started, I did give you a list of things that you have to decide on, and I gave you the date. The date is already passed. So in theory, you should already have everything decided. So it was mainly on the finals, such as radiators that they're gonna get and sink that they're gonna get, but they sort of waiting, or something suddenly is not available, and so yeah, I had complaints that it's too fast. but yeah, it happens.
Did you? And I don't know if there's anything in this, but did you find that there was a particular way, a better way to deal with if it was, say, a female and male couple, the female versus the male, or was it just like just don't think about it too much, don't look into it too much? Or do you find that, okay, the women generally are looking for these things and the men just want, like, I don't know, they just want to get it done or something like that?
Yeah. Men are very practical, and women is definitely deciding on the final results, like the final look of it. So I've learned to sort of navigate that and understand what she wants and what he wants. But again, I would always, at the very start, agree with them who is the main person to make the final, or who is the person to make the final decision, and make it clear to them that if you say A but you say B, and you said that the B person is the final decision maker, I will listen to him or her. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was, it had to be made clear, because otherwise it was a nightmare, and you just don't know, who to listen to, and you start having lots of other issues around that. But yeah, mainly women are just about exactly, which it did happen a few times. But you just really have to make it clear. And I don't want to lie, but I think even it happened where at some point there were maybe 2 or 3 clients where we had to say, I'm actually not going to deal with you. I just need to speak to that person.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was just too much. And it's not my job to be listening to all of this disagreements while having a meeting.
So would you have like only one of them in a group, or if you had a WhatsApp group, or
both?
They would,
if they both wish to be in a group, I did and like to have both of them because they had access to everything I said. It wasn't an interpretation of one of those people translating to the other.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
both could ask questions. There would always be different questions. It was amazing to see, you would have thought that they've discussed majority of this stuff and they probably haven't. So they're going to have different questions, different concerns, at different stages of the project. But to have the one final person that you always kind of, not necessarily speaking to, but have the final decision, it was a key for me. Yeah. So have
Okay.
both of them, definitely. It
Yeah.
helps.
I wanted to just talk. There's a couple more things I wanted to touch on.
Yeah.
Um, it was actually when you were saying, most of the subcontractors you had were foreign, and it just reminded me of a situation we had with a client. It wasn't a situation actually. He was creating these manuals and brochures for his contractors, and they were all
Right.
in English. And I said,
Right.
and I know his subcontractors, most of them are Polish.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Right.
and Romanian. I was like,
Mm.
why don't you translate them? It
Yeah.
it really isn't that difficult to do. What things can owners do? Because
Hmm.
we can't expect them to go out and learn another language. But are there any
Yes.
little things that they can do just to kind of smooth that conversation to
Mm.
make the subcontractor feel, hey, oh, this guy actually just, wants to communicate with me better. Or any
Hmm.
tips for anyone that doesn't know how to, generally, as you said, and I've had this experience, um, I understand this now as well. People from different cultures, they address people differently. They
Yes.
might want to be more direct and things like that. Like, what would you say?
Okay, good question. I think for us was never an option to translate into their language because at the end of the day, I'm still communicating with them in English. So even if I had a couple of Polish people, most everything was in English. I didn't want to do it I
Yeah,
would have a conversation with them in Polish when I was on site, fine. But everything had to be in English because even if something happens or someone has to take over, they need to understand and need to be able to
yeah,
go through all the correspondence, let's say, and figure it out. So we had to have people who speak English, at least kind of communicative level. And I don't know, again, I think it just was the thing that I am foreigner, and it was pretty much all of the guys were Eastern European, as I'm from Poland, so I could understand better what they were saying.
yeah.
They could put three words in a sentence, and my husband would understand it completely different. He's like, "How do you know what they mean?" I said, "I don't know, because when I came first to England, that's probably how I
No,
communicated. Do you
I
see?"
understand
And
exactly. Yeah,
they translate directly from their language, and they
yeah,
don't mean to be rude and whatever, but this is what they're asking for. You understand? So I don't think there is a like well, one thing it would be always putting in points. So what I found was not to write a big text or not to write an email, very short, very specific, and in points. And I always say reply in points as well. So reply to my points. Most of the times they didn't listen, but at least it was kind of
yeah,
coherent and I could figure it out what they're talking about and about which point. But at least, the more clear you make it and short and simple, they're not going to be offended. If
yeah,
you speak English and trying to be pleased and super polite and putting a billion of words,
yeah,
probably it's not going to work for them. Just be
yeah.
straightforward. So I
I
think
think
this is
that's
the thing.
I think that's a really good tip. I think that I've worked with, I've lived in other countries. I am living in another country essentially right
Yeah,
now. And I mean, seeing the difference in kind of people who kind of go around and they don't want to
yeah,
say the direct thing and they don't want to offend anyone. I think it's a really good point of like just keep it in bullet
yeah,
points, keep it in points, and
yeah.
you can't really go wrong.
But the thing is, people who do go around and use loads of words, it doesn't mean that they do it in purpose. They probably is the way of dealing with things, and they how they've been brought up, and it's their culture. So for them, it's challenging to actually switch and be so like straightforward. But I found that most of the times it worked better. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So, um, just to wrap up then, are there any tips, anything we haven't covered, anything that you'd say for like advice for new owners or someone that's, someone that's maybe on the tools and they're thinking, oh, I could do that. I could just start my own firm and, any advice
Mm-hmm.
you'd say in terms of making things run smoother?
Oh, again, I'm going to say exactly the same thing as I said a few times before. The transparency, and just be super transparent, not to try to sell what you don't do or you can't do. Don't overpromise. If you know that you can do something in 10 weeks or 3 months, don't say is that. Just add a little bit on top of it, so you always have that buffer. You better that your client is super happy because he finished faster than be super disappointed because it extended, which happens sometimes, but you can't avoid it. Um, don't take it personally. Always agree with them, but agree in a sense that when you have a discussion, they disagree, say, yes, you're right. However, this is the point. And we all like to be right. And sometimes it hurts and turns your stomach when you say, I have to say, yes, you're right. But you do make your point and you try to, because you don't want to have a war with them. You just want to help them. I think if we also go with that thought of I'm going to help them, it's not just about getting as much money as possible. That might kind of change your mindset and just makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, it's hard. It depends. It depends
No,
who
I
you
think
are
that's
and what you
excellent.
really
I
want.
think I think that's excellent. And I mean, I always, as I said, comes back to the communication, the clarity
Yeah,
as early as possible as well. Um,
yeah.
yeah, I think that's great. I think that's fantastic. So, I
And it
mean,
doesn't mean
we'll,
that you always have all the answers, right? Like you can be as transparent as you can, but this is only with the knowledge that you've got right now. And in maybe 3 months' time, the transparency would look a little bit different, and that's okay. You may have more knowledge, more experience, but it's again, if something goes wrong, that's cool. Just carry on. It's never going to be perfect. We're not here to be perfect. Just as
yeah,
they say, 80%, that means it's good enough, and you just carry on and adjust as you go.
very good, very good.
Yeah,
Okay, I think we'll wrap it up there. I think you'll be
fab.
coming on again. I'm assuming you'll be coming on again. So
Well, I'll
we'll
think
we'll
about
wrap
it.
it up there. Thank you very
All
much
right,
for your
great.
time.
Thank you. Thanks so much.